Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 588 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme is one day at a time. Our quote of the day comes to us from Abraham Lincoln. The best thing about the future is that it comes one day at a time. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to personally invite you to join something powerful, the Team No Quit 101 Challenge. For the entire month of August, my good friend Samson and I are going to challenge you to complete 100 push-ups and run 1 mile every single day. No cost, no fancy equipment, and no special gyms. Just you, your commitment, and the drive to compete with and against yourself. This isn't about perfection. It's not about failing or succeeding. If you miss a day, don't quit. Just get right back on track the next day, and don't let one miss turn into two. And if push-ups don't work for you because of an injury, just change them out for something like squats or crunches. No excuses, just solutions. We've even put together a free printable PDF tracker so you can look at your progress and see where you are throughout the month. To get it, just email me at chris@noquitliving.com, or you can connect with us on Instagram at no_quit_living. We'd love for you to join us because here's the truth. We do rise when we lift others up. I'm really excited to have my good friend Josh Pastner join us once again. I'm honored to call Josh a good friend, and I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Make sure you grab a pen so you can take some notes, but most importantly, make sure you take some action. Josh, I'd like to welcome you back to the No Quit Living podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me again. You're my man. Good to see you. And I'm going to tell you this. You continue just to be a force in this field of positivity, of incredible message. You look at I guess it's over your left shoulder, process before results. I mean, you talk about that all the time, and if you follow you on X or any social media, anyone that follows you, you really have a great grasp on it. So it's always an honor and pleasure to be part of anything that you're doing, and to have a great talk here about just sports, basketball, UNLV, life in general.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and appreciate you for writing an endorsement for the book. And I didn't say this to you when we were talking offline, but the first time, and this is going to be crazy, the first time you were on the podcast, your episode was released on Thursday, March 29th, 2018, which I know sounds crazy, but when I was just doing a little bit of research for the episode yesterday and I was looking at some stuff, I if you had bet me, I would have lost that. I would have said it was probably 2021, 22, but I can't believe it was back in March of 2018.
Well, all that means is that people are only to listen to us right now. They're not seeing us. That only means you got a little more gray hair in your beard. So that's all that means. And I got a little more gray hair on my sides and my hair right now. So as you know, time doesn't stop for anybody. You know what I mean? So things move forward. And, Chris, one of my it's funny you talk about that back in March of 18, and that's crazy. I didn't think about that. I would agree with you. I would be thinking it would be March. If you said when was the last time we did, I would think March or sometime in 2022, 23, actually, believe it or not. I mean, 18 is bonkers, but I would, one of the great elementary, as simple wisdoms of life that I truly believe in, and it's easier said than done, but is literally one day at a time. And if that doesn't show you from 2018 to 2025, basically 7 and a couple months, 7 years and a few months later, about one day at a time. And here we are, I don't know another way, what a piece of better advice I could give. And that's a great reminder on that.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure a bunch of our listeners will appreciate that, because it doesn't matter where you are in life. You could be a teenager, you could be in your 60s, 70s, 80s. it's literally one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month. And it's easy to look back at all those days and months, but obviously they blur together because so much has gone on in your life, so much has gone on with our listeners in my life. And it's just the reality that, you got to do what you do each and every day because the time's going to pass, whether you are really being super intentional or not. So I guess to kick off this interview, what is the biggest thing, or is there one specific thing that you are most excited about kicking off your first season as the UNLV men's head coach this season?
You know what? And even talk about what you're saying on, but just to add a little more to your thoughts on that, what you just mentioned, you are 100% right. It's sort of like raising kids, especially when they're little, and the days are so long, the babies are crying, you get really sleep, but the years go by quick. And when you think about that, you think in a day, man, think about that time when you and I talked back in March of 2018, you would think to get to July of 2025, 7 years later, you couldn't even imagine that, you know what I mean? And here we are. And so just again, it's a great reminder, and how precious life is. I mean, how things, as you mentioned, how fast they move. But in regards to the UNLV opportunity, I can't really put an exact words on my enthusiasm and my excitement for this opportunity to be sitting here as the head coach at UNLV in one of the most storied programs in the history of sports. Because when you think of, for some of your listeners, if, UNLV, the Runnin' Rebel basketball program in that 80s and 90s was an iconic global deal. I mean, it was Showtime. It was like Showtime with the Lakers. I mean, it was a spectacle. It was the cool thing of the cool thing. I mean, celebrities would be coming in here to watch games, and I can't tell you how many recruiting players, where obviously they weren't born during that time, but their parents or their coaches were saying, like, my favorite team ever was the 1990 UNLV Runnin' Rebels, or the 89 Rebels, or the 91 Rebels. And so to be sitting here and being part of that is like, you got to pinch yourself. It's like putting on that little league jersey, even for myself, growing up around the game, being aware of this team, of this program, and then how now wearing the polo and, representing UNLV. I mean, it's like putting that little league jersey on when you're younger, and, the hair on the back of your neck sticks up and you get the goosebumps, and it's just, yeah, it's really cool. Now, and it also gives you such a drive that you want to do so well, because there is such a passion for the fan base here that they want to bring it back. And so you're just driven by that. One, I'm a self-motivated human being, but two, when you include that with the excitement by everybody around you, it just gets you. As much as I talk about motor and how important kind of having a pep in your step and having that engine ticking and running at all times, now you have an extra pep or two in your step, just because of the extra added incentive of the enthusiasm by the fans.
I appreciate you touching on that. And you and I were talking, I think it was probably last season, and you were doing some stuff with obviously staying in basketball. And, I remember a couple of conversations we had just via text about your opportunity. And candidly, I knew there was always going to be an opportunity. The question was whether it was going to be, that next year, whether it was going to be, at a school you really had a passion for, or what have you. But I remember I was actually traveling with one of the college teams that I was working with this past season, and kind of the rumors were going around X and Instagram, and I remember texting you, and you were just saying it's been a whirlwind. But seeing your excitement the first press conference, and then when you were there with your wife and your kids, it was just really cool, because I think in sports today, especially in college, big-time athletics, you don't always see a lot of the personal side. You see the wins and the losses. But I just want to congratulate you on this opportunity, because I know you're going to do a great job, and I know you're super excited. But I just wanted to say, as a friend to you, that I'm proud of you, because you stuck with it, and you always had a great attitude. And like I said, it was never a question of if. The only question was when.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Chris. And part of that is, and of course, you and I've been friends for a long time and have known each other for a very long time. Yeah, I mean, look, and you're dealing with high level, athletes and sports programs and businesses. Look, we all know in sports there's a scoreboard. I mean, that's why you play the game, and win, losing. I mean, that's part of the deal. Fans want you to win. I mean, that's part of the deal. I still think sports is the greatest reality TV. I mean, so there's something about sports and how I think sports can bring a community together, regardless of any financial background, any other background, your view on one issue to another issue. Sports can bring everyone together to rally around something and really unite a community. I mean, that's the power of sports. And so it's an incredible field to be in. And, doing television the last 2 years, because I was the head coach at Memphis, the head coach at Georgia Tech for a total of 14 years, being at a high level at those two programs, but then being able to do television these last 2 years, and see things from a different side, almost from a 30,000-foot view, where I could have looked back on my time at Memphis, my time at Georgia Tech, and really watch things I did during, how we played, what we did, and I felt, okay, we did really well in these areas. Okay, we weren't so good in these areas. These are some opportunities that we need to be better at. Also, during these 2 years, to go around to see different programs, to see how different teams did things, study their film, study their philosophies. And I could do it all, doing all this stuff from a 30,000-foot view without the pressure, the internal pressure that you put on yourself of winning, having a decision of winning and losing. Because when you're sitting in that head coaching chair, how you're going to guard the ball screen, as simple as that, or how do you guard this out of bounds play can affect winning and losing. And so sometimes things can get blurred because you're not able, you're just so locked in on your present team, on that present game. You're just literally deep in the forest. So being able to kind of, again, being at 30,000 feet, being out of the forest, having not the pressure that you put on yourself of every decision could affect the game on either direction, really was a big thing for me to be better and prepared for this opportunity and be a better coach moving forward. And it was almost like a sabbatical in a sense. And so it was healthy physically, mentally, professionally, emotionally, all the way around. Where at the time when I got let go at Georgia Tech, I thought the sky was falling. And it's just as this thing I always believe in, things are always deeper than they look on the surface. And when I look back, it was maybe the best thing that could happen to me, not only just for professionally, but I'm talking physically, just health wise, being able to kind of recenter and recharge, because again, when you're in that intensity of things, sometimes you can, go to the left, to the right, and not, you're running on a treadmill in a sense. And, you and I have talked about that, and being able to stop for a second and really see the big picture.
It's interesting that you shared what you just shared. I was talking with a head coach just last week, and we were talking about the concept that in today's day and age with NIL and transfer, and not that it was easy when you were at Memphis and Georgia Tech, but things are moving so much quicker in many ways today that you don't get to reflect as much, not only as a head coach, but also an assistant coach or a director of basketball, whatever your title is, because there's so many things going on. And I think the ability to take a step back and reflect, refocus, recharge, not just for sports, but in life in general, I think is so powerful. And I think a lot of coaches that have stepped down over the past couple of years, it's not because they don't love their sport anymore. At least that's my opinion. I think that at some point you need to, whether you have an electric car or you have a gas car, you have to either charge your car or refill it with gas, because it gets to that point where it's just not going to go anymore. And I think the ability to recharge and the ability just to take a step back is so important. But I don't think enough people do it enough, because there's always something extra that you can do.
Well, yeah, and you're right about that. About in today's game, think about it. So when the season's over, so you let's just say that you end sometime in March. when that's over, you have to there's a good possibility you're losing your entire team to the portal. And so for the next month and a half, you're either trying to retain your players or you're trying to recruit new players, or because the previous ones have gone into the portal and have left. So you're talking the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks it's just 24/7, and so you don't have time to sit and reflect on the season. Think about that. The season's over. You don't have time to think about, because you got to dive right, because you got to get a team, you got to get a roster. You don't have time to wait around. And then when that's done, let's just say sometime in May, okay, well, in the start of June, you start your 8 weeks of summer practice, of access for your next team for the next season. And you have that June and July, and you're busy recruiting, and and then maybe there's a week and a half to 2 week break in between summer and the start of fall. But a week and a half and 2 weeks is not a lot of, and probably because you're probably going to be on a family vacation with your family, and you know how that is. You're busy with your family, with your kids, and it's not like time you don't have like 5 hours where you can just sit and kind of watch things back, and you can just and then you're right back in the fall, and that's kind of how the cycle goes. Interesting. I had a coach tell me this at a high major school, whose teams are very good, top 25 program. They told me that they are so obsessed about trying to go to the Final Four, more so than not about going to the Final Four, that they just want to avoid and delay having to recruit a whole new team the next year, I thought that was an interesting, obviously he was being a little facetious about that, but I could see what he was saying. He just wanted to delay it, more so than getting to the Final Four. Just, I don't have to then, because I know when the season's over, the very next day, I'm like, I have to go right. There's no time to stop, because you're right back in trying to either retain your guys, as I mentioned, or recruiting a brand new team. And it's, and it can be an intense, because, I think in this climate with sports, with the way it is in college athletics, you can quickly flip a team from 1 to 10 and go from bad to really good in a hurry. But you can also go from really good to bad in a hurry too. Whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, you knew these next 2-3 years we're going to be really stable and really. The way it is now, it's just literally brand new. 1 year you could be good, next year you could be really bad, and it could flip like that. So it's much harder to your culture can remain consistent, but the guys on the team could be in and out, in a different team in and out. But it's important, as the head coach and the leader, the culture remains the same, no matter which person's filling that jersey year in, year out.
I'm glad you touched on that. It's a topic that you and I have spoken on quite a bit, and I'm curious to get your point of view, because what you just said, I could not agree more, is unlike 5, 10, 15 years ago, if you're graduating a couple guys, you're going to lose some to attrition. But it used to be where you'd have to sit out a year and do things where players said, as a sophomore or junior, I don't want to sit out a year, so I'm going to stay here. To your point, you could have 13 guys the last game of the season, and once the portal opens, you could have 0 guys, and vice versa. But the culture piece, I think, is just as, if not more important. And you know this more than anybody because you're a big culture guy, that culture doesn't happen automatic. I think it comes in one of two ways, by design or by default. And I think some of the programs that have great coaches and staffs and even great leaders on their team, I think the ones that really work on their culture are going to have an advantage, because as you know, you could have the most talented team in the world, but if you got 5 guys or 5 girls going in different directions, it's going to be tough to beat a great team.
Well, yeah, and you're right on that. And the thing with culture, again, just my personal opinion, and you probably, because you study this and have seen it from so many different programs, so you know better than I do. Culture is not about putting up a saying on the wall and having some and we all do that. I mean, we all have sayings on our walls and stuff. I mean, that's, you're going to do that in the locker room with pictures and all that. It's got to be a way of life, literally every single day, where it's almost an obsession. And there's 2 things I look at, Chris. One is, if you came to my practice tomorrow, And whether you knew basketball or didn't know basketball, but you sat in my 2 hour practice, you should be able to leave that practice and say, I know what's really important to Josh Pastner. It might not be, you might not know what I mean by when I'm saying greening the ball screen, or you might not know that, but I can tell, well, man, I already know what's really important to Josh Pastner based on that 2 hour practice. And that's got to be an every single day thing. And then secondly, I think this is it's easier said than done. You and I can sit here and talk about it, but it takes a lot of energy, focus, discipline from the head coach or whoever is the leader in charge, that the culture is really going to be based on what you tolerate. And it's easier said than done, because look, it can be exhausting to have to be on it every single second to making sure that the culture remains with the integrity that it has. Because this grit. I mean, like, sometimes you're like, man, I don't feel like dealing with it. You know what I mean? But if you don't feel like dealing with it, there could be a little slippage in the crack in that part there. And then that could create just like a little water, like a little drip, drip, drip. And then it can into something, to a bad plumbing problem later on. And so to have the energy, the focus, the discipline to, okay, no, I know I don't, I'm tired, but no, we're not doing that. Or, hey, it's been a long day. No, you're doing it again until we do it right. And I'm just giving quick examples. So I think those things are really, really important from a leader standpoint, and not to lose sight of that. And it takes it's a 24/7, 365 type of deal if you're going to sit in that chair. You know what I mean? It can't, and that's why maybe not everyone wants to do that, and that's okay too. But if you're in that chair, to not allow that slippage in that culture, it's got to have that mindset literally all day, every day.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was talking to another coach, I think it was a week before last, and we were talking about the idea that during the season, you got a game, home, away, you got practice, maybe someone rolls an ankle. There's so many things to do. Maybe you have some recruits on campus, and a lot of times you'll take your foot off the gas, that culture gas pedal, not on purpose, but then all of a sudden you lose 2 or 3 games, and it's like, hey, let's now jump back into our culture. And I think it's the opposite. I want to get your 2 cents on this. Is when you're winning, let's say you have a 2 or 3 or 4 game win streak, or you're just playing really well, I think that's when you double down on watering your culture, because then when you have a dip, you're able to go back to the foundation, as opposed to you lose 3 or 4 games and maybe you haven't touched on culture in 2 weeks, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, culture time.
Yeah, well, and Coach Olson, Lute Olson, who I played for and worked for at University of Arizona, used to always say this: the best time to get on guys is after a win, and like to really drive it, like you just mentioned, is after winning. Losing, you can be hard on the guys, but it's also the confidence is shaken a little bit. And in basketball, I mean, really in anything in life, but my specialty for right now is basketball. I mean, confidence it's so much between the ears for players to perform. I mean, we spend so much time in the weight room, which is vital for their bodies physically. But I mean, you could almost take 90% of the time and just spend it on your mindset, and in the return on investment, because it's so much between the ears in basketball, because it is such an instinctive game. It is such a confidence game. But I think it's critical, as you mentioned, when you're winning, you feel good. And when you feel good, sometimes maybe a guy doesn't do an exact thing, but you let it go because you're winning. Whereas if you had lost that game and a guy didn't do a certain amount, box out, I'm just using boxing out as an example, you would be jumping all over him, because that might have cost you the game. But if you win and you see something that he maybe didn't box out, and you're like, I don't. Again, the discipline and the focus, it's easier said than done. The energy it takes to, do not allow the let up, because yes, we won that game, but that lack of possession or that lack of box out, for an example, could cost us a game. And let's not wait until we lose to jump to coach him hard, to jump on him, to say this is not acceptable, this is not tolerable, this is not what we do in our philosophy of our schemes. And so, yes, that's just as important.
I got to change lanes here for a second. I think we could probably talk for about 2 hours on culture, but I know you are familiar with the famous Jim Rohn quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." If I could grant you dinner tonight with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up from, who would you pick for your 5?
Good question. I don't know if I could tell you 5 because there's a lot of people. I mean, I'm a people's guy. I love people. I'm a people's person. And so I'm interested in people. Like I'll sit on an airplane, just ask them questions, or I see someone at a gym and just tell me about your journey. Like, what's your story? Like, how did you get there? Like, what give me the backstory of it all. And it's very interesting. I've met a lot of people who, I've met people who you would never think of anything, and then all of a sudden you hear their story, and they're worth 1.1 billion because they started this tech company. You would never have thought it. You know what I mean? You're just and so it's interesting to hear different things. And but I tell you, a person, dead or alive, and I say this with all due respect to the guy because I think he's for what he did, would be Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman played for the played at Arizona State football. Great football player, played for the Arizona Cardinals. And anyone that doesn't know his story, it's an incredible story. Talk about a heroic decision. After 9/11, he was about to sign a huge contract with the Arizona Cardinals. And he instead elects to voluntarily join the Army and becomes a Ranger. Unfortunately loses his life in it ended up being a friendly fire, but he lost his life in combat in a sense. And I mean, you talk about, I would love to say, I mean, how that mindset, you know what I mean? And I think that's, I would love to sit and just talk to him on his thinking, because obviously what a patriot. I mean, all first responders, all military are patriots, but to be able to do that, considering what he was leaving, I think would be an incredible. And you might not hear that from everybody all the time. I know it's probably, but that would be one person I would, because I've always remembered that when he did that, and I was just like, talk about a hero. I mean, just an amazing person.
I'm so glad you touched on him. Of all the podcast episodes I've done, nobody, I don't think, I would have to obviously go back to listen to about 600 episodes now, but I don't think anybody has said Pat Tillman. And I remember exactly where I was. I was coaching college basketball at the time, and my father actually told me he heard it on ESPN or WFAN radio at the time, and I just remember that impact of his passing. But to your point, literally about to sign a financial contract that would have set his family and probably his kids up for life. But there was no doubt in his mind. He just said, based off of what's happened in the last however many weeks it was, he was like, not only am I not going to continue to play football, but I'm going to go to war and to battle. And I just think he would be a phenomenal person to interview. And I'm glad that you said that. Talking about failure for a second, and we were just talking about winning and losing. I found this quote today on my calendar. It's from Abraham Lincoln. "My great concern is not whether you have failed, but whether you are content with your failure." And to me, that epitomizes what you do as a coach, and what I try to do as a mental performance coach with teams and coaches is, it's not just about winning and losing. Yes, to your point earlier on, there is a scoreboard in any sport out there, but I always look at it as, how do you handle those losses? Are you content with losing? Not content meaning like, okay, you're going to expect to go undefeated all season, but how do you handle that loss? And do you really and truly want to get better? And that's something that I've struggled with, because working with so many different teams and players, everybody handles losing and winning completely differently.
You're right. People handle losing differently. My personal opinion, I think when you lose as a head coach, it's the worst of the worst, because you feel it. You know what I mean? And you really feel it. And it's funny in coaching, because you're really dependent in basketball on 18 to 23-year-olds in college basketball to put a ball in the basket, as because you've coached, so you understand that. So it's a different perspective on that. But just as you have in your book over, as we said at the very beginning, to your left there, process before results. And maybe I've gotten better about this as in time, and maybe being the 2 years out, and we'll see how I am during, if I can back up what I'm going to tell you right now. I don't know. I mean, we'll see, and I'm well aware that I might not be able to back it up, but there's some things that you just have to relinquish control, meaning that's just out of your control. You can, as you talk about process before results, you can be as prepared and as ready to go and as locked in and as XYZ as possible. And then when you get on the court, it doesn't go your way. You know what I mean? And can you handle that mentally? And that will be an interesting thing, because look, doing television, I've been to games where I saw the two teams practice, and I saw a team practice, and they were so buttoned up. It was boom, 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 boom. And it was a high level practice. They were so locked in, so ready. Then I see another team, same team, or the next team who they're playing, like just go through the motions, sloppy, guys hanging on the sidelines, doing, and then they go on the game, and the team that was doing that ends up winning by 30. You would not. I remember going into telling the announcer, like, they're going to lose by 25 and it was the exact opposite. So now, why is that? I don't know. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't feel good about having like that all the time. And I would hope that's not how they do it all the time. But because I saw a bunch of, I saw different teams, different practices where sometimes and others, again, same thing. So I say all that to say, and again, the majority is if you're prepared and you've had a great culture, as we've talked about, and you're organized and disciplined, you're going to have a better chance of winning, more so not. But sometimes, as my point in that one example, it just whatever it is, because you're dealing with human beings, you're not dealing with robots. Some things, whatever it may have been, and basketball is such an energy game. And boom, 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 you hit a couple shots, and all of a sudden the team that was so locked in gets kind of punched a little bit, and how they respond, it wasn't how you wanted them to respond. So yes, how you handle failure is just as important how you handle success. I still think how you handle success is actually more important than how you handle failure. But I really think this. I think you really get to see someone's true character. I think you get to see their true identity. I think you get to see their true DNA and their fiber, their internal fortitude when there's failure. When there's success, everyone can be rah-rah. And one of the things I do not like is when you're being a front runner. And what does that mean? You just can't be rah-rah and high-fiving guys and demanding and being a great teammate when things are going well. You've got to be the same way when the things aren't going well, because we all know there's going to be times where and it's not going to go well. You're going to have tough stretches. You're going to be on a losing streak. You're going to have it, and how you deal with that really shows who you are, what you're about, more so than when you're winning 15 in a row. Really talks more about sometimes, I think, when you're dealing with failure.
I couldn't agree more with that. And going back to what you said early on in the interview about reality TV, I think it is so easy, to your point, when you're playing really well, when you're watching the sidelines, it's like, hey, things are going well, but you really and truly see what goes on during those tough times. And I won't speak for you. I'll speak for myself, having coached at the college and high school at AAU level for so many years. I've never been a part of a season, so I'm not talking about watching a game, but I've never been a part of a season as a player or coach where we haven't had a bunch of runs up and down. And I've also never experienced myself, forget watching, but being involved with the team, that we started on day one and then game one just played our entire top-notch basketball for an entire season. As you know, there have been teams that have started in the last 30, 40 years, 5-0, 10-0, 21-0. I forget what year it was, but Wichita State had an unbelievable run, but I think they lost in the second or third round of the tournament. My point, long-winded, is that I could not agree with you more, is that adversity hits, and in college basketball now being 40-plus games, give or take, you're not going to go 40-0. You're not going to go 0-40, but you're going to have a 2-game win streak. You're going to have 3 games where you just don't play well. Maybe you win 1 or 2 of them, but it's how you handle adversity. And one quick question I want to ask you before we finish up here is the idea of respond versus react. I think when you react, especially in basketball, like if you foul me hard and I just turn around and push you back, that's a reaction, and usually, be a double technical or something like that. But how you respond as not only a player and a coach, I think really identifies who you are, because the best teams that have the best cultures are able to realize, yes, we might be in a windstorm right now, but how are we going to respond to this so we can play our best basketball next possession or after the quarter's over?
I think the best reaction a lot of times, and not even just in basketball, the best reaction is no reaction. How many times, like Chris, if you or I were, and forget just basketball, just in life, if you or I were out at a restaurant and you were, you got really escalated, you were mad at me about something and you were yelling at me and cursing, to de-escalate is for me just not to have any reaction. And if I want to create fire on fire, and you see a lot of things in life, if I want to come right back at you and start yelling and cursing at you, and now I don't use any foul language, but if I was to do that, or that's where you see a lot of things happen where there's bad incidents, whether it's on a course of a game, whether it's between coach and a player, or something just out of life where you're like, something so small, like it wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? And sometimes the best reaction. Now, again, I go back to it's easy to say that when you're sitting in a chair, but when that fire is coming at you and that intensity, sometimes the best reaction is no reaction, and it allows you to de-escalate the situation. And when you have that fire about you and you're ready to fight, there's a difference between ready to fight with physically than ready to fight, like saying, okay, man, my fighting like on the court, instead of like, okay, the guy fouls me, instead of pushing him back and getting a double technical, man, I'm just gonna, and then the next time, I'm going to play that much more locked in. So there's a loose ball on the floor, I'm going to dive on the floor. I'm going to play extra hard, and allow him or allow the individual who's out of sorts to kind of lose their mindset. And you can see it happen a lot of time when there's been issues with coaches and players, because a player maybe will say something to a coach in a disrespectful moment, or even a player or a coach in a heated moment with a fan.
Yeah.
Because of the energy and the intensity. You hear something, a word, they're boom, and then you escalate, run and go right back to them. Same thing on X or social media. Right after a game, the energy. You're ready to put something out there because you're mad and you want to, and then all of a sudden, how many times the next morning you're like, you got to do so much, trying to get it off and apologizing, and maybe even cost you your career, if you say the wrong thing. So sometimes I always say this, the best reaction is no reaction, and to always sleep on things. And so if you can do that, I'm telling you, that would save so much heartache. And again, Chris, I'm the first to say I'm not perfect at it. It takes a lot of awareness. You've got to be really conscious about that, because it's easy. Like I said, if you and I were at a restaurant, we were arguing, and it was kept escalating. It's how to to not try to eliminate your ego out of the way. To de-escalate is the no reaction, but it takes the discipline and the awareness to do that, and it's much easier. And you see it in road rage. How many times do you see it you see it. You see it. You just see it all the time. So it's a real interesting dynamic.
I think my mom growing up probably told me to, think 3 seconds or 5 seconds, or go to my room before I say something I'm going to regret. And I think as I got older, I got better at it. But there were the times when I remember altercations with friends and teammates. It was exactly that, where like you may say something, and instead of me like take 2 seconds, like I'll snap right back. And what happens 99.9% of the time is then you get more agitated, then I get more agitated, somebody else jumps in. But it's, to your point, so much easier said than done.
Well, you know what? It was like an ER doctor one time told me, and this is the same, like you just talked about, the same thing. An ER doctor told me, he said, one of the best advices I could ever give you. And he goes, there's one thing I give you. I said, what's that? When you're at a stop sign or a red light, and it turns green, wait 2 to 3 seconds before and he says, the best advice I can give you. And because how many times a car tries to go through a red, to try to make it through, and So, and it's the same thing with what your mom advised you. Just give it a couple seconds before you say something, because it can end up, you say the wrong thing because you're mad, and then it could put you in and especially in today's climate with phones and this and that. I mean, and when you're mad, you can say the wrong thing. Not that you meant it, but you say the wrong thing, it could really bite you in the rear. And that's why the no reaction to our point is better than any reaction.
No, I couldn't agree more. Last question I have for you, because we've taken a lot of time and I know we could probably talk for hours, but want to just see if you have any parting words today you'd like to leave with our listeners before we finish up.
I don't get a penny. There's nothing I get out of it. There's no financial gain for me. I would recommend people listening to really get your books, and especially The Process Before Results. I think that's an opportunity for people to really, you have a good perspective on it. So I would highly recommend people to do that. And that's one. And again, I get nothing out of it, and two is, in reality, as I said at the very beginning, one of the great lessons is one day at a time. I think, as simple as this is, the serenity prayer, if anyone, I've done this before, Chris, when our team whether it's just the intent, guys are about to, because you've played, two guys are about to fight and this and that. And look, you want intensity in practice. You want hard-nosed things. You're going to do, but I don't want guys fighting, and you don't need any. I mean, like I said, we're in a controlled environment. We don't need to be, this isn't, there's got to be you got to draw the line at some point. Yeah, you can be competitive. You want competitiveness, but you can't cross that line. There's been times where I've taken the team, brought them to the center circles where they're about to cross the line, and just said, hey guys, let's just recite the serenity prayer. Amazing how much that de-escalates everything, And then the third thing I would tell you, the last piece of advice, one day at a time, if you could just remember the serenity prayer, even when you're just driving around or whatever it may be on the serenity prayer. And the third thing I would just say is as we talked about from March of 2018 to now we are in July of 2025 and the 7 years in between, literally just how, precious literally every second is. If you look at my X account, Coach J Pastner, it's at Coach J Pastner. But I put on there every day is a gift, every heartbeat's a gift, every breath is a gift. And I really believe that. And if you can kind of keep that perspective, again, easier said than done, I think it allows you to stay in a great state of mind.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. For those of you that maybe are not UNLV fans, you definitely want to check out the Running Rebels this year. I'm excited to see what you do, but most importantly, as I said before, I'm proud of you for how you handled your adversity. And I know that we will talk again soon. And for our listeners, definitely make sure you follow Josh. I will tag him on his social media accounts, but I really appreciate you jumping on here today.
Thanks, Chris. Anything for you, my man. I really appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you for listening to episode number 588. Josh shared some really powerful things with us today, but one thing really stood out to me, the idea that sometimes the best reaction is no reaction. And I don't mean, nor am I suggesting that you don't care or that you simply ignore things in life, but sometimes the best thing we can do is nothing. As you go about your day today, I challenge and encourage you to think before you react and just maybe take an extra 5 or 10 seconds before you do. As you go out and crush your day, remember that we believe in you and also that we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.